He's got more than 1 million followers on social media, and his music videos have raked millions of views. His name made headlines last year when he spoke in favor of the president while he was on the campaign trail. By all accounts, Sheff G's career was on the up, right?
Everybody say Sheff! Going on? Everybody say Sheff G! Sheff G!
Then this week, he pleaded guilty to attempted murder. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Prosecutors say Sheff G used the money he made from his music to fuel gang violence in Brooklyn, New York. He's just one of 32 defendants who were named in a sprawling 140-count indictment. He pleaded guilty, yes, but despite the seriousness of the charges, he'll only have to serve 5 years in prison. This is Michael Williams. Well, he might be known better by his stage name, Sheff G. Sheff G is pretty well known, especially in Brooklyn. Now, as far as his style of rap, it's more on the drill side, a style that's often been met with controversy. For some, it's art. It's an honest reflection of a rapper's way of life. To others, and this is why it's controversial, others see it as a glorified image of violence, taunting rivals, flashing guns, and in the worst instances, people have died. So let's go back to 2023. Sheff G was named alongside 32 other alleged members of the 8 Trey Crips and its affiliate gang, the Nine Ways. They were hit with a lot of serious charges, like second-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, weapons possession, assault, attempted assault, kidnapping, gang assault. You get the picture. It was an 140-count indictment. Prosecutors say it's alleged many of the acts of violence were caught on camera and that the defendants boasted about their criminal activities on social media and in text. For the allegations against Sheff G, though, we have to go back just a little more, to October 21st of 2020. Now, prosecutors say this was the most egregious incident in the indictment. On that day, there was a mass shooting in Brooklyn. One of the defendants, Kamandre Ducato, allegedly was seen on surveillance video coming up out of a sunroof on a car and just opening fire while others fired guns from the driver's side and the rear driver's side windows. Multiple people were shot and injured, but the bullets ultimately killed their rival, 23-year-old Theodore Sr. So I mentioned this has to do with Sheff G, right? Well, according to prosecutors, an hour after the shooting, Sheff G sent a text getting confirmation that, the act was carried out. In other messages, he sent pictures of the victim and news articles about the shooting. Then 2 days after the murder, Sheff G treated everyone to a lavish dinner to celebrate the death of his rival. Now, when the indictment first came down, the crime spanned from 2019 to 2023. It even named rapper Tegan Chambers. Now, Tegan you might know better as Sleepy Hollow, who, by the way, is going pretty viral, especially on TikTok right now for his collaboration with Grammy Award-winning rapper Doechii. Their song Anxiety. Well, according to prosecutors, the alleged gang members used 40 firearms to carry out 12 shootings of 13 victims, including 3 innocent bystanders. So the October 2020 shooting isn't the only one. It was the most egregious one, again, according to prosecutors. On April 6 of 2021, a 53-year-old man and a 43-year-old woman were hit by stray bullets fired by 3 gang members who were targeting a rival, then hopped in a getaway car allegedly driven by Sheff G. On June 20th of that year, a group of 8 Trey Crips beat up one of their own because they thought he betrayed Sheff G. And there were rewards given out for committing violence. Prosecutors say Sheff G offered money and expensive jewelry for those who carried out the crimes. So given what's been accused, there was really 2 options, right? Go to trial or take a plea. Well, Sheff G took the latter. He pleaded guilty this week to attempted murder and conspiracy charges. But this is why the plea deal is that, a deal. Because under this agreement, Sheff G will only serve 5 years in prison and 5 years of post-release supervision, despite them really wanting 20 years in prison. Prosecutors said in a statement, notoriety should not shield this defendant from justice. He used his fame to fund and direct violence, terrorizing our streets, and though we sought a much longer sentence, he will now be held to account. Brooklyn will not tolerate gangs that endanger our communities, and we remain committed to dismantling these criminal networks and holding those responsible fully accountable. Now, according to the Associated Press, Sheff G's lawyer said his client took the deal because it was the best interest of everyone involved. So right now, 17 of the 32 members have pleaded guilty, but there are still 14 cases still pending, including Sleepy Hollow's case. I'm joined now by Detective Barnes. Detective Barnes, I know you don't have affiliation with this case, but you've worked a number of cases involving gangs, involving rappers. What's your reaction to Sheff G pleading guilty to attempted murder?
These cases just came to eat week to week. They just keep popping up. I think that anytime someone pleads guilty, especially on a case like this, it's a pretty significant blow to the individual, and in this case, the gang as well.
And in your opinion, do you think he was taking the charge, as some people say, to kind of save others? I know sometimes when it comes to gangs, there's obviously the whole no snitching rule, but do you think in a way that he took the plea deal in order to not have to testify against other alleged gang members? Why do you think he took the plea instead of just taking it to trial and weighing the options there?
Well, 5 years is a pretty, it's not a significant sentence. It's any day for that you're spending behind bars is, a long time behind bars. But 5 years for an attempted murder is not something that you would just, you would think that, you're throwing your life away, so to speak. But I think that, as his position in the gang, he's kind of the cash cow. He's the moneymaker. And so I wouldn't expect that he would take the charge for someone else. And I would think someone else would probably take the charge for him as a way to keep the gang financially afloat.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, too, kind of under the plea agreement, because prosecutors say they wanted 20 years. But as we now know, the deal was for 5 years in prison, 5 years of supervised release. Where do you think the disconnect happened between prosecutors wanting the courts to sentence him to 20 years, but instead it's just 5 years in prison? Where do you think that disconnect was?
One of the things that is a common phrase in law enforcement is big cases is synonymous with big case problems. And so when you indict so many people, and I think it was over 140 counts in their indictment, you're going to run into some problems, a whole bunch of problems. And, you may have cooperating defendants, and those individuals may change their mind. Once information starts hitting the media and you're starting to get a lot of public press and a lot of influence, people may just back out. So there's definitely a lot of different dynamics at play in this case.
Yeah, a lot of dynamics and a lot of allegations, too. Just looking at the allegations against Sheff G, it's him being the getaway driver where innocent bystanders were shot, rewarding other alleged gang members with money and jewelry to carry out shootings, treating gang members to fancy dinners to celebrate a murder. And this is according to prosecutors. What are your thoughts just about the allegations, given what appears to be he had a very pivotal role in this gang? He appeared, like you had mentioned, as a leader. But what do you think just about the allegations against him?
I've seen just in my past experience in gang investigations involving rappers, a gang member is going to rise through the ranks, typically through putting in work and committing crimes for the benefit of the gang or through their financial status. And so typically when you have rappers that have a popular following on social media, maybe skilled at making music, they can rise up as just merely by their position of power and influence within the gang and actually drawing attention to the gang and kind of putting the gang on a pedestal. So if you're not the guy that's going to pull the trigger, you at least have to fund the guys that are doing it. So it makes sense in the aspect that if you're not going to be the individual that's actually committing the crime, that you have to take care of the individuals because there's no benefit of them not mentioning your name if caught.
And what's it like investigating cases like this? Now, the indictment spans back to 2019. He was initially arrested in 2023. So that's about a 4-year-long period. What's it like working a case like this where, the allegations span back years, meaning investigators have been working on these types of cases for years, but what is it like to do it in your expertise?
A detective that spends years working in investigation, you learn to kind of master the concepts and details of the case. Obviously, in this case, there's a lot of different people involved. So each individual person is going to have a different personality or a different responsibility for the crimes that they're alleging that they committed. And so you have to kind of figure out, okay, the information that you've developed, whether it come from an informant, whether it come from physical evidence, you have to kind of match up to see if the information you have actually matches with what you're able to develop. And it could be challenging.
And do you think that there's kind of this new level of sophistication from gangs nowadays? Or do you think it's easier now to investigate these types of cases, given people are very vocal on social media, they're vocal in podcasts? But what do you make about just the level of sophistication that you may be possibly seeing within gangs nowadays?
The old moniker with gangs, like gangs, if a crime was committed, you didn't talk about it after it was committed. In today's world, especially when you bring in entertainment and rap, you have to have you can't sell music that you're not actually living the lifestyle. So in order for you to sell these records, if you're claiming to be a drill rapper and you're involved in all these street conflicts, street beefs, and involved in all these violent crimes, you have to talk about it, and it has to match up. You can't talk about it if you're not living it. And I think that's what ends up drawing a lot of unnecessary attention to today's criminals.
Especially if you're talking about it in your music, you're texting other people just about these types of things. I think people forget that investigators, despite if you delete those messages, investigators can still pull it up. They can still trace it. And I think a lot of people oftentimes do kind of forget about it. Why do you think it's so hard? And I know we've had conversations about this before in other stories, but why do you think it's so hard to leave the gang life behind? Especially if you want your career to continue taking off. Is it just kind of the old adage, blood in, blood out? But I'm always curious as to why, especially in cases of drill rappers too, why it's just so hard to leave the life behind, especially when you're on the up.
That question is, that's a good question. I think that, when you make it from the ground level or grassroots level of rap, coming from a neighborhood and just kind of trying to break through into the mainstream, your support base comes from your friends and your family. And so these guys that you're hanging out with every single day, these guys that have kind of helped you build your persona, kind of help develop your career, you can't turn your back on them. And sometimes that means their problems become your problems. And also now you're at a point where you still need the support of the street. If you haven't signed a major record deal, you still need those ground level roots of support in order for your career to continue. And you can't keep that support if you're rapping about things that you're not doing.
And rap music, to me, in my opinion, is one of the few genres where, despite having criminal convictions or even the bare minimum allegations made against you, you can still have a thriving career. I mean, in some cases, people are still even releasing music even while in jail. Now that Sheff G hasn't been formally sentenced yet, but he will be serving that 5-year sentence when he is formally sentenced later this summer. But do you think that his career will still be on the up? Do you think he can make a comeback after he serves his time?
I've seen in so many different cases when rappers are incarcerated, they kind of lose time, and there's always a new artist that's on the edge of breaking through. But I think in this case, for the genre that he's involved in with the drill rap, this only adds to his credibility. I mean, now he can make a whole album talking about the court process and how he's going to do his time, how he didn't give up anyone, and it just kind of builds on the same content that he was putting out before. So it could, in fact, help his career.
And do you think that there was someone within the gang who may have cooperated with investigators, who may have cooperated with prosecutors? Because it's a lot of defendants here, more than 30 people altogether. But as far as just cooperating witnesses, do you think that there might have been somebody within who kind of divulged more information?
You know, anytime you have a group of people that are involved in gang activity and may be in the know of things that are going on, whenever they get jammed up, it's all about what card do you have to play. And so you always have to look at that aspect, because people, once you're jammed up, it's every man for themselves. So that definitely could weigh very heavily in this investigation.
Yeah, and it's a lot of time that a lot of people were facing, but a lot still ended up taking plea deals in their cases, but there's still a lot that still have to be sentenced and their cases still pending. Detective Eric Barnes, always great to have you on. Always love having you on. Before we sign you off, though, where do you think everything goes from here? Do you think that this is going to be the stop to our conversations just about, rappers and the allegations made against them, or do you think that this is something that we'll always see going forward?
I honestly believe that there's not much separation between street level rappers and street life. You have to be able to support yourself while you're building your career, and you also have to, we have to find a way to financially support your entourage and keeping people around you. Like, it's a very costly business. And then you also have to think about, in terms of security, now that you have made it and you're starting to get a little notoriety, who do you bring around? So a lot of times your friends that you grew up with, you trust them more than you trust hiring a private security, and it's less costly. So now their ways become your ways, and, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Again, Detective Eric Barnes, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Sheff G is set to be formally sentenced on August 13th. As for Sleepy Hollow, his next court date is set for April 11th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.